Hello everyone, this is Ari Moshe Wolf of Heart and Soul Centered Astrology. I'm going to speak to Mars in Aquarius conjunct Pluto through the 12 houses. So Mars enters into Aquarius at the end of this week, and then on the 27th of January here in the US, Mars will join with Pluto in Aquarius at 3 degrees. Before I jump in, let me just go over a couple essential points in understanding Mars and Pluto coming together in Aquarius. As always, Mars-Pluto is an incredibly powerful aspect. Whenever they come together, it speaks to a deeper evolutionary process. We're going to be making choices and elevating and liberating our choices to support our ongoing evolutionary growth. We might feel very threatened or challenged or stuck in some essential way, but that always points to where we have the agency and power to think differently and to make a new choice. Now, coming out of Capricorn, there can be this incredible weight of heaviness, responsibility, all of the messiness of stuff that I gotta be doing. There's a very strong, overwhelming quality to Mars completing Capricorn, moving towards Pluto in Aquarius. So just to appreciate that overwhelm, that stress, if that's present, is definitely transmuting right now. So the first framework that I would offer is the stress really corresponds to a significant degree, not so much the things that we need to do or the things that we need to meet and address and take responsibility for in life, but more so the conditioning we don't even realize that we're in. I was listening to a talk recently from two YouTubers about free will, and it wasn't they were both atheists, I think, but they were present, and I love actually hearing people that aren't like spiritually oriented. I'm talking about these ideas, and oftentimes I find a lot of resonance with it because it's stripped of a lot of lofty, sometimes inaccessible thinking. It becomes a little more practical and logical, and I really appreciate that. So this one person said something to the likes of, in the morning, if you're in the kitchen deciding whether you want coffee or tea, you think you're making a choice between coffee and tea, but what you're not thinking is that framework of coffee and tea is the matrix that you're living inside of. There are 10,000 other things that you could be doing, but you're not thinking about it. You're not thinking, do I get in the car and go skiing in the mountains of New Jersey? Or do I take off a day of work and watch Netflix? Do I walk outside naked in my slippers? There are a whole bunch of possible choices that we're not considering. The choices that we're focused on are really relevant to the path that we're already on. So there's so much unrecognized conditioning underneath the choices that we think we're making. It's like choosing between a sort of a stage set of options that we're not really often choosing very much. An aspect like this, you have Mars in Capricorn, you have the precedent and the conditioning of kind of where we're coming from and the responsibilities and roles and the demands that life has on us and who we need to be. This often brings a profound paradigm shift when you move into Aquarius, because Aquarius is not precedent. That's the interesting thing about Aquarius. It corresponds to what is not conditioned, what is not defined, what is not habituated. That's why it's the essential intelligent design of creation itself. It's the algorithm, it's the program. It has nothing to do with our human conditioning patterns, coffee or tea. It doesn't live in that framework at all. So there's an opportunity to kind of break out of a stuck mold. And the issue with Pluto is we don't know what we're holding on to. So we're fixed, we're stuck, we're obsessed, we're compulsively attached to a certain experience in life, the things that we want or need, or the things that we're afraid of losing. The key is to be willing to evolve, to meet the places of fixation and attachment and fear. And with Mars moving into Aquarius, moving towards Pluto, to generate some objective space to break out of, to break through whatever we're holding on to. So there's a possibility of recognizing, if I just let go of my grasp, of my attachment of right and wrong and who I should be and how things should go and what I'm afraid of. It's always, with Pluto, it's always about a fear of loss or concern with what we might get. The concern with gain and loss are sort of at the core of the Pluto dynamics. We're almost always obsessively orienting around Am I going to lose this? Or am I going to get this? Or am I not going to get this thing that I otherwise think I need? So if we create some space for that, we can actually begin to make choices that will further our evolutionary growth, bring us more into what we really want. Paradoxically, we miss out on the things that we want when we're holding on to it because we're afraid to make changes. So often we have to let go and kind of break up the patterns a little bit so that we can actually have what we want, but there needs to be a non-grasping quality to it. So this is what I'm going to be addressing as I move through this conjunction through the 12 signs, where there might be the weight and the heaviness of the conditioning of Capricorn, and where there's this opportunity to let go, to restructure, to break things apart, and kind of see it from a higher perspective, to access new choice possibilities, new ways of seeing. All right, so before I do that, reminder that I've recently opened enrollment for the School Living Library. This is a monthly subscription where you receive monthly access to a series of lessons, progressively taking you on a journey of learning from the very beginning. You gain access to my entire school curriculum, everything I've ever taught, including my complete training program, all for $45 a month. Pause or cancel anytime. And for this month, until the end of this month, I'm offering a free bonus. You receive immediate and free access to the Essentials course transcript, which is a transcription of probably roughly 60% of the material that you'll be getting over the first 16 months. So it's a very thorough transcript, over 400 pages, with a clickable table of contents. It's otherwise released progressively throughout the first 16 months with the lessons, but you can get it all now included if you sign up during this promotional window. So check it out in the description below. Okay, and so let's jump in. I use porphyry house system, which means in my house system, you might have more than one sign occupying a house. It doesn't really matter what house system you use. You can apply these teachings to the house system that you work with. For those that don't work with whole signs, you can actually have this framework. In a particular house, you might have both Capricorn and Aquarius. So you might want to consider that as I'm speaking this, because we're going to have a transitional process of starting with a Capricorn energy, but perhaps within the same house transmuting into the sign of an Aquarius. So there's an evolutionary process happening. So one way or another, stick with your house system. I'll say, people often ask me, to practice evolutionary astrology, do you need to focus on one particular house? Is there a right house system? To me, the answer is no. Evolutionary astrology fundamentally is a philosophical framework for understanding astrology, the natal chart, from a soul evolutionary perspective. And I know evolutionary astrologers that will use different house systems. In general, porphyry is what I use, is what my teacher used. But I really encourage everyone to make your own conclusions, observe and correlate, kind of be your own scientific astrologer, discoverer, right? Find out for yourself. I don't think there's one right system when it comes to these kinds of things. So I've been wanting to share that for a while. Okay. Pluto and Aquarius in the first house. With Mars. When it comes to Aquarius in the first, we're always looking at the initiation of experience, but that initiation requires freedom of the mind to not be defined by the past. I'm walking, and I realize, wait a minute, I forgot where I'm going. Now with Capricorn as the existing context, whether it's in the 12th or in the first, what we're dealing with here is you're given a purpose. Mars in Capricorn, right? It's like, go and climb the mountain. And at some point you realize, what am I doing all this work for? So there's a lot of freedom that's needed here in the first house to be able to, in a snap of a finger, realize that the direction I'm going, or that I thought I'm going, may not have any relevance with my actual soul path. It might just be a whole lot of thoughts and beliefs that I've had, or things that I was told over and over and over and over again. For some reason, this is coming to me right now. After I spent a little bit of time at a Taoist temple in China, and then I built out a van in the States, and I lived in a van. One of my teachers, seeing that I was going to live in a van, she told me, don't do Qigong in a van. I'm like, okay, I won't do Qigong in a van. And so for several years, I didn't do Qigong in my van until literally just kind of progressively, but really only recently fully grasped from within that, oh, she was probably thinking of like a small van that you got to hunch in. Doing Qigong in my van is no different than doing Qigong on a second story, floor of a building. But we tell ourselves these things and it sort of sets a path or a pathway or a momentum, and we don't question it. So Aquarius in the first, Mars and Pluto coming together is a surge of freedom, impelling you to make a completely new choice. So you might find that there is a direction in life that you've never considered. I never thought I would be doing this. And I'm suddenly letting go and breaking free from this. But it's so relevant for you. Often what is relevant for our path doesn't necessarily mean the things that we've been thinking about. Often they come as signals from our higher self outside of time, speaking to our sort of the destiny, that which is embedded in the Uranian program of our lives. So there needs to be some level of courage and willing to stand apart. The fear here is, I don't want to stand apart. But honestly, with this signature, if we're not willing to kind of walk it alone and trust ourselves, trust our instinctive soul guidance, we will feel a lot of stress. We will feel anger. The anger will just get so strong. Anger and stress and overwhelm, because we're going to feel like we're just doing a lot of things that we don't want to do. The issue with Mars and Pluto in Aquarius easily can be dissociation. Right? So we're disconnected from our will, from our impulsive nature. And so we don't know how to respond or differentiate ourselves or make new choices. So we just go along with the flow. And so we can check out, right? Just completely check out. And that can lead to sudden moments of just bursting in anger, or like, I'm just going to go. And like, whoa, where did that come from? So really getting in touch with where's the pulse of our soul want to go. And it may not be what the story of your life was. So now let's look at this signature in the second house. Second house corresponds to how we live and how we make our life livable. It speaks to the idea of self-value and self-esteem, and how our own sense of value and worthiness to be here extends into our relationship with our body, with the earth, what we're doing, what we live with, the things that we think are important, how we survive. And how we survive is oftentimes conditioned by social constructs. Well, if you want to be a surviving human being, you need to make money to earn a right to be here. So Mars with Aquarius in the second house says, well, wait a minute, like, is that the only way? Who said that I have to earn money to survive? Are the trees asking me to, pay them something to get the fruits, Now, of course, we live in a Capricornian system. That's like the stress between Capricorn and Aquarius. We can't just bypass the rules or the structures of our society entirely. So there's going to be some ingenuity here. There are other ways of living that reflects your own soul vibration. Like, what is it like to be you, where you're not compromising yourself just to live and just to survive? We're this eternal soul being, yet we compress ourselves into these standard lives, living these values that maybe we don't appreciate. And this can be the things that we have, the things that we own, the things that we possess, how we eat. Do we need to eat what we eat? The ways that we live, the ways that we earn money. There are all kinds of possibilities. And Aquarius has a lot to do with collaboration. So there might be ways of connecting with other people, working together, where your well-being, your benefit, you having what you need, works really well with me having what I need as well. We just have to think outside of the box. I often say this. I don't know if I've said it here. Sometimes when I'm taking a walk or I'm walking my dog, I'll look around at suburbia and I'll think, man, it's crazy how many bathrooms there are. Like if I had to go to the bathroom, I'll have to run back to my home. But I'm passing like 100 or more bathrooms on a 5-minute walk. It's just how we relate to resources and mine and, what's yours and the protection that we have. So there can be an overwhelm with Capricorn in the second house. It can be the grind of survival, paying the bills, needing to make our life work. And our self-value, our sense of worthiness can be deeply conditioned by what we can do to prove our own value or worth to live here and to be here. So this is opening the doors to honoring and respecting and appreciating the scent, the flavor of our unique being, that we belong here on the earth. And just really grasp that for a moment. Trees belong here. They're part of nature. Animals are a part of nature, even the domesticated ones, and we, even the domesticated we, are a part of nature as well. We come from nature, but we are so disconnected from it. We're even often so disconnected from our food sources. So there are so many other ways of living. Just think about all the lawns that we have and all the garden potential there are in lawns, and just a different way of thinking. And with Aquarius, when we start to think differently, we're going to resonate with other people that are also there. But until we think on that level, perceptually, we can't even see those other people, and they can't see us. So vibrationally, we actually enter in completely different paradigms. That's why Pluto, Mars, and Aquarius is so profound and really valuable to kind of reflect upon. Because we can find our lives really shifting paradigms and then resonating with ways of thinking and actual people and communities and ways of life. And wow, people are already doing this. Oh my God, there are people that are just like sharing food and growing lawns and public bathrooms in the middle of the hut, in the middle of the community, and building composting toilets. That's great. But we may not know about these people as much as we might Google and look for it if vibrationally we're not there either. So that's a big piece here. Pluto, Mars, and Aquarius in the third house. So in the third house, we're dealing with a realm of facts and information. And facts and information are kind of tricky because oftentimes what we consider to be factual are really just our opinions, and we can logically construe our opinions together and create facts, but these facts are just built on a structure of opinions in the first place. And a lot of what we think about the world, and a lot of what media and society and culture says about the world, are often just popular and consensusly held opinions. So what's happening with Mars and Capricorn, you can say from one perspective, there are the thoughts that you're supposed to have, how to think about certain things, the opinions, the perspectives, relative to the social data and perspectives that are held around you in your consensus reality. There's an element of, am I allowed to say this? Am I allowed to question it? Am I allowed to think differently? What happens as we move into Aquarius is we kind of step back from the presumption of ideas that we just assume to be true, and we question that as well. It's kind of like that whole coffee tea example. You say, what are you going to drink this morning, coffee or tea? Aquarius in the third house says, well, wait a minute. What if I wasn't drinking this morning? What if it wasn't about drinking something in the morning? It just kind of shifts the framework entirely. There's a thought, there's a question, there's an angle into understanding and kind of tuning into reality that is beyond the precedent of what we're used to thinking. So one element that I would speak to here is freedom to have a new thought, to ask questions. And that might mean setting yourself against seemingly popular opinion or the fear of what others might think or what's collectively agreed upon. There often might be projections or misunderstanding relative to ideas or thoughts that others aren't wanting to accept or apprehend. An example like that would be asking a question about a popular cultural narrative or something on the news, and that question challenges a sort of assumption. So people have their biases about what's true, and because of these biases, there won't be curiosity. And so then if you're asking that question, you must be in this political party, right? Like this is what you believe, and that may not be true. There's actually an unfixed quality to the mind where it's able to take in information because of the availability to become curious and access knowledge and information that the non-curious mind simply wouldn't be asking. So the more fixed we are on this is the way to see things, and relative to Aquarius, the way that I see things is going to be associated with the group or the people that I'm wanting to belong and be a part of. So we're shattering these intellectual frameworks of reality. And then in that shattering of these frameworks, we begin to actually build a much more holistic, cohesive picture. That's really what happens in the third house. Progressively and ideally, if we're willing to learn, we build an ever-increasing intellectual framework to understand reality, progressively how it all kind of interconnects. But it's much easier to just sort of accept assumed headlines and popular opinions. Now, this is particularly strong, of course, in this day and age with AI and how it's pretty hard, unless you're just paying attention, at first to know what's real and what's not real. Almost anything can be fabricated. And so the fabrication can kind of tug on a sort of collective energy, a collective momentum and rally feelings and opinions and perspectives and voices relative to whatever it's wanting to elicit in people. So there's a great need to have a sort of agency, clarity of thought, clarity of mind, to be a leader of your own independent thinking, not necessarily as a, I'm not going to agree with you, but as a repose agency. I'm going to take the time and consider, what are my questions? Now let's take this into any other kind of study. Every single field of study, even like astrology, the true journey of learning isn't just a formulaic, memorize a bunch of definitions. From an Aquarius third house point of view, we're rising above and actually liberating the mind from all the linear logistical details. We're kind of liberating from the empirical mind and seeing how it all interconnects. So it's like climbing a mountain, looking down on the city and being able to appreciate, I see from the bird's eye view how Main Street crosses with Broadway Street at that intersection, and it's this many miles from this other street, and this is how the city's organized, how it all functions. From within the city itself, it's much harder to understand how it all functions and how it all works. So it's creating some elevation, not being so quick to just form an opinion or form a conclusion. Mars, Pluto in Aquarius in the 4th house. So I refilled my tea here. We look at the idea of nourishment, how we receive and share nourishment in the 4th house. It's the experience of feeling and being at home, and a sense of emotional bonding, a sense of emotional safety, a sense of belonging. And all beings need that. I mean, it's such a core biological principle. The experience of feeling safe, feeling held, having healthy emotional, family, familial bonding connection. And yet often what happens when you think of Capricorn in the 4th is we become overly defined by the conditioning. Like, this is how I behave in my family, or this is my role, or this is how I'm supposed to be. This is what's acceptable, this is what's not acceptable. As a man, this is a healthy emotional expression. As a woman, this is etc. And including distorted and conditioned beliefs and ideas around how to share and give nourishment and the roles and how we're supposed to be behaving in life. There are a lot of inherited family structures and beliefs around family and belonging that actually don't produce a sense of belonging, actually induce a sense of shame and unworthiness. So I don't know myself to be belonging and lovable and acceptable as I am. I have to be this kind of person. Of course, that creates a lot of stress. Like, if you think of the 4th house as like from the point of view of the inner child, like there's someone in there that's like, will you please just give me a hug and love me, you know? So this Mars Aquarius in the 4th is a revolution of care. It's a revolution of family. The idea is to recognize that your belonging, your sense of family, isn't conditioned by the precedent. And for many souls, this may not even have to do with necessarily just your biological family or your biological family at all. Often Aquarius 4th points to your family and your community, your friends become one and the same. It's about creating a bonding and a family experience that's rooted in vibrational resonance. And how do we live, how do we care for one another when the ways that we understand this human being, the intelligence of the human experience, is honored and respected as an intelligent experience? Like, the emotional body has its own mechanistic reality, and it's to be honored and respected, not repressed and judged and shamed and told how it should behave and what it should do. There's a whole expansive way of living when we see the experience of care and belonging and nurturance as an area of life that we can evolve and make better. You can think of Aquarius in the 4th house as, metaphorically, you have a bunch of people in your kitchen. Now Mars joined and the kitchen is chaotic, right? Like, one child is gluten-free, one won't eat anything, the other one is always making a mess, the other one can't eat anything that's yellow or white. And everyone has these different needs and these temperaments, and there's like a lot of emotionality. This can feel absolutely chaotic and absolutely overwhelming. Kind of take some space from that, because one issue with Aquarius in the 4th can be total emotional overwhelm. Like, everyone's crying and needing something, and dissociation and checkout. In fact, emotional dissociation can be so strong because of hyperstimulation, Mars with Pluto transiting in Aquarius in the 4th house. So if there's that hyperstimulation, how do we deal with it from an evolved Aquarian point of view? So to slow down and regulate one's own nervous system, to kind of reconnect with a higher bird's eye perspective, what kind of system can I create here? What kind of ecosystem can I create that embraces all of it? Aquarius, in its deepest understanding, is this principle that the outer reality is also fractally alive on the inside. So we have all of the ecosystems of life are also this rich, deep ecosystem that exists on the individual level as well. So we have this external chaotic environment, but it's also in here. So what are the ways that we can create more space and evolve how we live to accommodate to more of it? I think in so many ways, the ways that we live as human beings, be it within a family structure, or just how we relate to being a human, are so isolated, be it a nuclear family, or just the ways in which we become overly isolated in our care and support systems. There are ways of more people getting more needs met when more people think in terms of us. But that often means letting go and stepping back and being willing to change the system, to change the structures. Interestingly enough, when you have more adults and more kids, even though there's more people and more needs, it creates a thriving ecosystem, just like any forest, right? A forest thrives with a diversity of elements. It creates a homeostasis and a balance that wouldn't exist if there were just a few different species. If there are only a few species, it actually creates more susceptibility for invasion. But there's a sort of strengthening of the collective immunity, a strengthening of the community when there's more diversity. So how can we allow that in and bring more of that in our life? And personally, relationally, this really just brings up the greater reflection on how can we show up and be more receptive to and be more available for where the energy of care and family and connection is in our life. But in that same sense, where might there be a need to kind of let go of the repression, the holding ourselves in alienation and isolation? There might be a need to kind of liberate the emotional body from whatever we may have otherwise been holding on to. Mars joining Pluto in Aquarius in the 5th house. This is about a renaissance of personal and creative freedom. How you express yourself, your social image, what you do, how people know you to be. There can be a hyper self-focus relative to Mars coming out of Capricorn. My social image, what I'm allowed to say, what I'm not allowed to say. Are they going to throw tomatoes? Are they going to throw flowers? Am I being appropriate? Am I falling in line? We've defined ourselves and our creative input, whether it's our business or ourselves as an artist or entrepreneur, whatever it might be, or even in our relationship with our kids. We establish a conditioned precedent about how we are in relationship to our own creative output. These are the things that I do with my kids every Sunday. A sort of route, right? But are we connecting with the individuality of our children? This is what I do as an entrepreneur. This is what I do as an artist. I'm an oil canvas artist. I am a pianist, right? But these are just frameworks where this raw, untamed creative energy has been channeled into a particular form. Those particular forms do not, and they never really did, define the essence of the creative spark. So that can feel stressful and overwhelming, especially, this is the thing with Capricorn, especially if money is associated with it, right? Like, if we're earning money, and you can think of this actually in any of these houses, to tell you the truth. If our role in life or our income or our sustenance, just the responsibilities that we hold, which oftentimes comes back into like, I have to be this because this is how I survive, this is how I get my Capricornian paycheck, this is the role that I'm supposed to play. We become overly defined by that, and then so we feel like we can't break out of that. But this is actually a calling to kind of come back to that inspiring spark. Who are we as a creative being, as we are created to be, the creative intelligence of our own being, when we're not fitting into or defining ourselves according to who we just were. And this really means there might be a more evolved and exciting and liberated way to access our own creative energy. If it feels heavy and stressful and we're not having fun, that definitely says something. Now, discipline's a part of life, so it's not about always having fun every moment. That's the teaching in Capricorn. But if it's to the point where it's a drudgery and we're just not looking forward to the thing that we're doing, that's a sign of something. So where can be this opportunity to liberate and open up new avenues? And how free and how willing are we to even consider a new possibility. I think the question is, where are we overly hooked and concerned with what other people will think? That's the trap of the 5th house. Everyone's looking at me. And so we're putting on a show, and we're overly concerned. We're losing our soul to gaining that approval, that recognition, especially if what we've done people like. But if we feel stifled on the inside, it's not really relevant anymore. If we haven't felt connected to our creativity, we've been kind of in a dull place and not accessing it, this Mars-Pluto is kind of like a spark that wants you to step into it. It doesn't matter whether you've ever played an instrument or picked up an art, a canvas, or have ever written a book. It doesn't matter what the thing is. If it's calling you, do it. Start that YouTube channel. But everyone else has started. No. Not everyone else has started a YouTube channel. No one started your channel. Don't even think in that box. That's the coffee tea situation. It's like, yeah, it's YouTube, but like it's not. It's you. You know. And that's just one example. Do you. It's going to take its own trajectory. Don't look at the precedent of what you or other people have done. That'll just trip you up and suppress this raw energy. It wants to go wild. Claim that. Be open to it. And of course, like, going wild with that energy never means you're... So the other issue with this Mars, Pluto in Aquarius, if we're coming from a place where we've been manipulating Pluto, right? I'll do whatever it takes to get the likes, to get the views, right? The other expression might be happening is, wow, I feel like I've lost that authentic sense of self. So there might be a need to just kind of let go, simplify, let go of the popularity and all the things that maybe we were overly attached to for a while, but has been draining our own energy. That's an expression as well. Mars joining Pluto in Aquarius in the 6th house. So I like to describe this signature as freedom from slavery, freedom from servitude, freedom from the drudgery and the heaviness of the daily, day-to-day, the busy work that is completely arbitrary and unnecessary. The things that we do in order to achieve and do the things that we do is very much a 6th house thing. It's the ongoing maintenance and routine. And also our vocation, the things that we're working on. So if you're a practitioner, you have a skill set and you're constantly improving and developing that skill set. We might be liberating from a sort of overcompensation of, well, I'm never good enough, so I'm always focusing on way too many details, but stressing my nervous system. You know, in the Capricorn, maybe you learned a particular tradition or a lineage or a technique. And so you're practicing this technique, but then you're not in touch with your own agency and higher intelligence. So imagine giving a massage and kind of working the body, you know, all the little pieces and doing all the technique. From a very 6th house point of view, you're checking every box. Okay, I spent 3 minutes with the thighs, I spent 3 minutes working on the abdomen, I'm now rolling the arms and I'm doing this technique. But is it healing? Like, is it actually healing? Well, no, they wanted this kind of massage, right? They told me the kind of massage that they wanted, and I'm giving them that kind of massage. Great. But do you feel like you're really walking your path as a healer? And you can apply this to how we live our life, cleaning the dishes, brushing our teeth. Is it functional? Is it actually achieving a result? We are always improving the conditions in the 6th house, ideally. So we're not just living daily routines. We're actually making things work better and improve better. Now, Aquarius is elevating it to a much higher level of consciousness. So we're going to see and diagnose our reality at our level of consciousness. So for example, if someone has pain in their body, you might turn to a particular technique to address that pain. But for the most part, most of our solutions are solving symptoms and not getting to the core, the root. Our ability to kind of get to the root really corresponds to our capacity to see the larger picture. It's not just, oh, there's a pain, work it out. There's a larger holistic reality that encompasses much more, right? So getting out of the narrow view of filling out the check boxes of your life, you know, brushing your teeth. Well, I'm doing what I was told to do, Capricorn in the 6th. This is like the technique you do, but what really works? Are there other ways? You know, I won't go there, but there are many ways. There are many ways to approach our care and our health and our wellness. So if we feel overwhelmed by details, in fact, if we feel overwhelmed by things not working, systems malfunctioning, be it our health or the systems of our life, or just too much of a mess, or in our work there's like too many details, it might be because we need to make some new choices and decisively say, I'm done doing it this way. I'm going to empower myself to embrace a more evolved way of thinking that actually creates order and congruency and health, not persists in just dealing with one crisis after another. You could think of Aquarius in the 6th as liberating from crisis. In a sense, we become dysfunctionally acclimated to living in a crisis state, especially with the precedent of Capricorn. So much of life is just like how we learn to deal with dysfunction. And I think Aquarius teaches us that that's not life. That's something that we've learned. And even if it's normalized, it's not really, it's not quite enjoyable. And no one said it has to be that way. So there's a lot of looking at what's dysfunctional, not just assuming it has to go that way. It might be as simple as just rearranging the furniture, creating a new system, a new drying rack system where you put the dishes to dry, and that's also where they belong. So you kind of save one of the steps, things like that. And there can be a lot of freedom and excitement and liberation to kind of have completely new pathways. Now, there are entire healing paradigms that actually work on very, very, very subtle levels of energy attunement. And these paradigms become less and less physically oriented. But to understand that really requires freeing our mind from a more linear physical orientation around this world, actually beginning to see some of the deeper designs at play here. This is where we can work with vibrational medicine and really working with thought at the core of working with physical dynamic. That's where Aquarius in the 6th house can really start to understand healing on a much higher level of or sound vibration, just like really working on a more vibrational level becomes less and less dense, but much more effective as we kind of understand that principle. Mars and Pluto coming together in Aquarius in the 7th house. This is freedom from expectation. 7th house is all about expectation. We enter into relationship, all kinds of relationships, and from a Capricorn point of view, expectations are really important if we're going to create some kind of congruency and shared mutual understanding and ground in relationship. Many of these expectations are sort of assumed, and we just kind of get in line with them. Like, if I'm buying a loaf of bread at the supermarket, there's a role playing here. So me and the person that I'm buying the food from, we're each playing that role, and we're expecting each other to. Like, we don't really stray from that role. These roles are sort of implicit in many family structures. And that's normal, that's okay. But what happens with Aquarius is we have to also step outside of those roles and recognize, I am not the bread buyer and you are not the cashier. I am not the father and you are not the child. Within time and space, yes. But on the soul level, no. We are just souls playing these roles. And so what happens with a 7th house Aquarius is we get overly conditioned by the structures and by the roles, and thus we expect ourselves and other people indiscriminately to always play and fit into these structures, into these roles. There might be a break out of that where we can actually listen to one another. The psychology of listening, really hearing another in a new way. Because for the first time, perhaps, we're not seeing them as this object, as this structure, this form that we put them into. Maybe we're not seeing ourselves, so we can actually express ourselves, share our feelings, communicate our needs. We can show up relationally in a way that is so much more true and aligned with who we actually are when we're willing to break out of the precedent of everything that we've known. In the context of many our relationships, though, so many of the expectations and agreements that we set into are not explicitly spoken. So on one hand, there can be these shocks that happen. You can say Mars-Pluto can manifest as another person or a partner, sort of all of a sudden saying, I'm feeling this way. And you're like, what? You don't feel that way. You're not a person that wants or feels or thinks those things. That can't be. But actually, I've been suppressing this all this long because I didn't want to feel rejected and I wanted to meet the expectations that we kind of just fell into. So that can happen externally, or you can be that person within a relationship where you suddenly realize, I'm not expressing myself, I'm not communicating my needs. So we're needing to break up and kind of reorganize, kind of loosen up all of the projections that we're putting into our relationships so we can actually allow each person in every single relationship to be completely who they are, such that within the relationship themselves, It's a meeting, a symbiotic relationship between two complete and whole individuals that are choosing to be in relationship to one another according to their own nature and vibration. This might be scary because this might mean stepping out of the box. This might mean that who you are and how you behave or how things go don't necessarily fit into the box of what you thought. And this is not just a romantic relationship. This can, again, be within a family structure where just all of your conditioned ideas of what it means to be a spouse, what it means to be a father, a mother, etc., are just conditioned ideas. These roles don't have to be thrown out of the window. They can still exist in a functional way in the ways that they're relevant, but they don't have to become everything that we are. So there might be more permission to be more of what we are and to allow more flexibility in our relationships, realizing there's a lot more potential for more needs to be met when we're willing to be more ourselves and loosen the grip, loosen the hold that we might have on other people that otherwise keeps them from just being free to be who they are. That's the thing with Pluto here. We have to really, in all of these signatures, on some level, be willing to let go. The willingness to let go is, if I really listen to you, I might not hear what I want. You might not meet my needs. If I express myself, you may not want that. But that's okay, because in that allowing for it to be what it is, we allow the ecosystem of each relationship, which includes each relationship and all of the extremities, right? All of the relationships connected to that relationship, all the people that I know, that you know, and it's always a community. We allow it to come into alignment according to the program of life itself, not according to what we're trying to make it be. Mars, Pluto, and Aquarius in the 8th house. So one thing about Aquarius in the 8th house is it can speak to the subliminal, suppressed memories of the past, where the rug has been pulled out from underneath our feet. So we can have these memories of being hurt, being betrayed, being backstabbed, being rejected, being left out to die alone kind of energy. Being burned at the stake for being a fill-in-the-blank witch, astrologer, healer. And so there can be a sort of jadedness and distrust that we carry in this Aquarius in the 8th house signature. On one level, this conjunction offers the opportunity to be re-stimulated. And if we are willing to kind of take a step back and not get so invested in the knit and grit of the Plutonian 8th house power dynamics and where we think something's happening to us, but to kind of read the archetypal patterns, like it's a dream and it's a symbol. What does this reflect happening in my own consciousness, right? Like what's actually wanting to heal and liberate right now? We can use that as vital objective information to become more psychologically self-aware. Now, the other dynamic is if we do find ourselves sort of entrapped and stuck in a pattern of addiction, remembering that addiction is basically to the exclusion of all other experiences, we progressively source our sense of power and fulfillment and satisfaction from a more and more narrow range of experiences. So we become dependent on, I need you, I need this, I need these things, I need to belong, I need to be popular, I need to be wanted, I need to be the cool kid. All of the ways in which we get stuck on this external object focus. This is where we have to really take our energy back. And the opportunity with Mars, Pluto here is to have that objective clarity, to recognize, oh my God, I'm just living in this matrix of addiction. And whatever that is, whenever we're addicted to something, it means we haven't really connected with a deeper source of power. So we think we need something out there that we lack, but it's actually because we have something inside that we're not giving. We're not aware of it. So the energy that we're not circulating and generating in the world psychologically manifests inside as a sense of lack. And so then we think we need it, but that needing it just becomes this empty dependency where we never actually grow or get anything. So the ability to be absolutely decisive. This could be a relationship, a sexual addiction, patterns with substance, getting involved in patterns of giving ourselves away out of sort of that egalitarian Aquarian trust. We want to be open and available. We don't want to reject or exclude anyone, but we end up getting hooked over and over again in these lower vibrational dynamics. To get to the psychological core, what's really going on? What is it that I'm really seeking? What is it I haven't claimed in myself? So like a surgery, Mars-Pluto. Mars-Pluto, by the way, is surgery. I mean, that's a very great correlation for just surgery in general. sort of incisive, getting in there, opening it up, and kind of taking the thing out. With Aquarius, we're just kind of rising above the trance of thinking that keeps us at a certain vibrational state, and we're becoming aware of that. So we realize, oh, I am not these patterns. I've been playing out this addictive trance-like state for a very long time, and that's not who I am. It's who I thought I was. I'm something far more powerful. So another dimension can really speak to manifestation. When we want something, it's very easy to kind of get stuck on the idea of lack, right? And we fixate on the not having of it. And again, in many cases, we can then use our life experience to reflect back to us where we don't have the thing that we want. Mars, Pluto, and Aquarius really want to work vibrationally, again, on the level of thought. So to really work with, are my thoughts, are my vibrations in congruence with the thing that I'm wanting? And so what do I have to clear and stop? What patterns do I need to break from completely to be more incongruent to what I'm actually seeking? So this is really raising our vibration and accessing more of our power. And there might need to be a courage to make choices, to commit to experience, be it a relationship, a business deal, investing our life force energy as a healer, as a teacher, like whatever it expresses as, there might be an output of our energy of giving ourselves to something. And through that giving of ourselves, we end up affecting a deeper evolutionary process that we wouldn't have experienced otherwise. But we need to have that clarity to recognize, oh, my evolution is not going to proceed if I don't get vulnerable and risk the possibility of being hurt. When we open ourselves up to the vulnerability of sharing ourselves, be it with in the context of deep, intimate bonding, or bringing ourselves out into the world and sharing our gifts, circulating our energy, we become much more susceptible to what comes and what goes. What people might project upon us, they're a witch, throw them in the fire. There's a lot of that, and we have those memories, right? And so that's vulnerable. But then at the same time, we learn how to stand as the observer, clear in the fire. Right? We remain sort of as the unchanging witness while the heat rises. And I would always, always much rather the unchanging witness in the fire than a sort of placated, addictive, I'm not really getting anywhere kind of state. High level intensity is often, I should be careful, but in general, I find it to be much more preferred than can't really feel anything. Of course, it can be hard. So I'm saying I should be careful. Of course, it can be hard. But there's often deep evolution that happens through that. One more piece is if we find ourselves holding on, kind of holding this position of manipulation, like Mars Pluto can be incredibly violent and psychologically manipulative in Aquarius in the 8th house. There's an invitation to really look at what are we grasping onto? What core victimization is impelling us to hold on to so much control? This is an opportunity to let go of the grasping and to allow what comes to come and what goes to go. What happens if I stop trying to control? If I stop trying to manipulate outcome or make others be what I need them to be? There's allowing everything to come and to go, and the clarity of mind that continues to find out who am I as we allow all of that to happen is deep, because we realize that we access a power and a resilience that we never otherwise would have known in all of our fixations. One more interesting point to bring forward with the signature in the 8th house is when it relates to desire in general, like I want you, or sexual energy, and just all the different expressions of lust and desire. There's a liberating from the impulsiveness of it and raising to a higher level of consciousness. There can be a sense of the lower level animal-based desires are just being fueled by a deeply unconscious dynamic. Aquarius here wants to not be bound by the impulsivity of wanting. So it's elevating sexuality, it's elevating the technology of sexual connection, even working with our own kundalini from a much higher level of consciousness. There's a sense of claiming our own sovereignty and agency over our life force energy, not being consumed by it or consumed by it. Not being consumed by it or possessed by it, right? Whatever. Liberating ourselves from the grasp of it. And so we realize we are not possessed by any kind of impulse. So there's a transmutation process that might really begin to open up. And if that's calling you, definitely begin to explore how this Mars-Pluto energy wants to invite a transmutation of otherwise very raw, visceral impulses to a much more refined, higher level of soul consciousness. Mars-Pluto in Aquarius in the ninth house. There are two expressions that I want to point out here. One, when it comes to our own internal relationship to knowledge, Aquarius in the ninth is always asking us to liberate from the last thing that we realize. Easily, our realizations become belief systems. And Jeffrey Wolf Green beautifully has spoken this, like, what we believe has nothing to do with what we know. When we know something, we don't need to believe it because we know it. So when something becomes a dogma or belief system, it literally reflects a lack of actual knowledge and insight. So being able to grasp, here's a belief or an exaggeration or a thing that I was trying to convince myself to be true, but what is actually true? And truth in the ninth house is always from our own direct personal insight, direct experience in the moment. So being able to constantly liberate from that, but that also means our spiritual quest, our spiritual journey will bring us into relationship with the beliefs, the teachers, the teachings of the world around us and our community around us, what other people believe. We have to resist the temptation that Aquarian need to belong and to be a part of something, to conform and just sort of connect with the agreeability of what the group believes and what other people think. So you can take the metaphor. This is a good metaphor for the signature. You're in the church or you're in the ashram. And that ninth house impulse here is to not settle on any kind of answer. So the ability to stay open to the present moment unfolding journey where there is still more to realize and more to see. So you're being told a dogma or an edict of belief and you don't accept it. Now that can really trigger a lot of, well, you don't belong here, or you might feel like you don't belong here. There can be a deep sense of alienation relative to the dissonance of our own cosmological awareness and those held around us. So there can be a sense of, okay, my group or my religion or my spiritual orientation, it's going in a different direction than what I thought. And the truth is, it's simply going in the direction of your own soul awakening and the particular modalities or groups that you might be affiliating with at any particular time are just relevant for your journey right now. The beautiful thing about this signature happening in the ninth house is the journey itself the realization of truth doesn't require the right cosmological orientation or the right religion or the right spirituality. Every single orientation, every single path, so to speak, is limited in the sense that it's never going to apprehend the full scope of reality, but it's useful in the sense that it offers a particular angle into it. So even atheism, or any form of theism, or bhakti, or more intellectual, or whatever it might be, these are all just different ways of apprehending the full picture. The full picture is like 12th house, Neptune, Pisces. When we're looking at this manifesting in the ninth house, we just have to be open to the ongoing experience to where the path wants to lead us. And that might really burst some of our boxes in terms of what we thought we'd be thinking about and people we'd be talking to or books we'd be reading or philosophical discussions we'd be having, things like that. The other dimension to speak to, similar to when we have this in the third house, there are always going to be these collectively held beliefs about the world and geopolitics and things like that. And so the kind of like a religion, we can have a whole group of people kind of joining this momentum of a particular outlook on reality. And it just becomes we're repeating beliefs and using events to confirm our existing beliefs. And then it's like a matter of proving your rightness, proving that you know the answers. This might be a calling to find your own truth. Right? And that might be from your own experience. What do you actually know to be true versus what everyone wants to be true or wants you to think is true as well? Your voice and your truth is really going to reflect where the realization of reality is blossoming on your path. And if you can stay authentic to it, not try to convince yourself to fit into some other framework that is not indigenous to your own experience, then you might find yourself speaking and bringing forward new insights and new realizations. So there might be the courage to speak your truth, even if that differentiates you from the group. Speaking your truth and offering your insights will oftentimes have the effect of opening new doors, perceptual frameworks that we didn't otherwise have before, because you're willing to be authentic with your own understanding, with what you know. There's also that ability, Aquarius had that bird's eye view, so we can kind of liberate from our beliefs, from our ideas, from our existing cosmological understanding and see much more of the picture. If you think of this coming from Mars and Capricorn, the Capricorn in the ninth is like tradition. You have your history, it's a lineage that's been practiced for 20,000 years, and you're the next in line to practice it, and you have all of this history before you, and there's something very stable and grounded about that. But of course, with Capricorn in the ninth, we have all of the dogmas, and this is the right way to do it, and the right thing to believe, all of that kind of stuff, right? With Aquarius, it's not like you're inventing your own religion, it's just that you're thinking about reality anew for the first time. And there are certain groups or lineages or practices that very much resonate with that orientation, but from a Capricorn perspective, many of these orientations have become very crystallized. I often say, just humorously, that it's funny that Taoism exists, because the Tao, or the principle of the Tao, has nothing to do with an ism, right? That's an example of where that which is sort of undefined or unconditioned by its nature itself can become its own conditioned or structured framework, which is fine, because that there's a purpose for that, makes it accessible for humanity. But so there's just a looking at things as they are, and that might mean, even with all the teachers that we have, there's the freedom of this present moment to actually find out right now, and the truth being accessible within our own experience. We have to have that clarity, that sharp sword of discernment, to really see through and kind of move through. Where am I giving my power away to someone else's realization, to something that someone else learned, and I'm being told to believe in, but I don't actually know?
Mars, Pluto, and Aquarius in the 10th house. And my apologies for the fluctuation of my mic usage. I'm still landing how to properly record in this new situation. So, 10th house deals with, of course, we're dealing with sort of natural semi-sextile energy, the Aquarian and the Capricorn 10th house energy. So 10th house is our role, its structure, it's how we're conditioned in society. And it's really important. Like, following the rules is super important for, like, not getting into a car accident and going through high school and arriving places on time and not getting arrested. And there's a sort of ethic and morality in the 10th, but also a sort of shared consensus agreement that we're all going to fall in line in certain essential ways so that we can live in a structured society that works. And yet, we're all way too conditioned, much more than we realize, where we become so identified with this falling in line, with doing everything right, to the point that we may have adopted for ourselves an entire lifestyle where 10th house, our work, our career, our role, our sense of responsibility or duties in life are so deeply conditioned by social values and judgments that we're feeling deeply suppressed. So there can be a whole buildup of stress and energy in the signature, especially coming from Mars and Capricorn. That can be a lot of, like, you work all day and you come home and, you just need to find an outlet for all of this energy. That Cancer polarity is like, what are you going to do with all of this repressed energy and emotion? We can really find ourselves just getting very tight in being the kind of person that we need to be. And life can be seen as somewhat unrewarding and like punishing. It's like, you got to work really hard in whatever way that means. And I mean, consider this for yourself. Even if this is not manifesting on like a literal, like, your job level, to what extent can we identify that we hold the framework, I'm going to try my best and do the right thing, and I'm still going to struggle? An almost defeatist mentality. It's not about doing the right thing better. Doing the right thing is good, but we often have to kind of question ourselves, and is the thing that I'm calling the right thing right, or is it just what I've believed and have come to know to be right? So Aquarius here wants to break through the box, the concrete of that 10th house reality. Who you are in society and your work, your role, might have nothing to do with the precedent that's previously been set. And the question really becomes, what personal reality has been suppressed? When you were a child, you wanted to be an artist, but your father said, no, you must become a lawyer, or, you were ridiculed in high school for being different and you try to normalize yourself as a result. I mean, anyone who has Aquarius in the 10th house, on some level, your work in the world, if you're really in touch with your unique vibration, is opening up new pathways and accessing a way of being that doesn't have any context. And it might not be like, I have a job. It might be like what you're doing, how you're showing up in a social sense, and the way that you're structuring yourself within society simply reflects the unique vibratory reality of your soul itself. But there needs to be some courage here. There needs to be a decisiveness with Mars-Pluto. I'm going to be clear and decisive in ending this pattern that is not great. Now, if there's been so much repression, oftentimes that repression leads to addiction, because we turn towards substances or experiences that will help us to access all of the human emotions that we've been pushing away. So rising above and being able to see, this life, the addictions, the escaping, the working really hard, the stress, the dissociation, is that who I want to be? Is that what I wanted to be when I grew up, to become a normalized, stressful person? I don't think so. So we can really reconnect with our unique vibration, find that we're just going to walk a path that we had no clue even existed. Have some courage and bravery to actually make those choices. So one more piece to speak to with the signature. There can be a sort of immaturity here, especially if two expressions. If we've been repressed, there might be an immaturity of like, forget it, I'm just going to go to work with no pants on and who cares about the rules? And that will have a lot of negative backlashes. It's not really freedom, it's reactivity. The other is the state of anarchy and chaos. So 10th house being order and structure, we might find that there are certain, that the structures of our life kind of get mixed up, kind of radically reorganized. And the roles and the ethics and the moralities feel a little bit more ambiguous. And it's not because we're meant to live in this morally ambiguous world. It's because there needs to be a calibration of all of our existing judgments so that we can reacclimate to something that otherwise we are too tight and unavailable to even apprehend. So embrace shocks and surprises like getting fired or just waking up one day and realizing you don't want to go to work, or structures in your life just sort of change and it might feel unsettling. Try to grasp the larger long-term picture. What's really going on? Where is this really taking you? Mars, Pluto, and Aquarius in the 11th house. So I'm going to speak to two facets of the 11th house here. And this is a useful teaching. I think oftentimes we don't know how these two fit together. So one is community. The other is science and innovation. So community, we're often going to be resonating with other people that share in a similar interest or a similar vibration. In our lives, we'll form groups or circles with many different kinds of communities, right? None of these communities define us in our entirety. And we might find that in certain communities, there are certain qualities of our being that resonate, that belong. And then in others, we can find that other parts of ourselves really resonate, right? Whenever we become wholly identified as I am this, I am a member of this defines me, we'll always end up pushing away some part of our full psyche. So the issue with the 11th house is we have this community on the inside with a profound, diverse ecosystem of characters. And a Mars-Pluto transit will be bringing forward this one weird guy in the corner that you didn't want to actually pay attention to. Like, that's a part of you too. Or the part of you that likes these things, but you don't want anyone to know that you like these things because you'll be outed or excommunicated or no one will like you. What are the elements that we've excommunicated within ourselves because we're just afraid of standing out, or we're afraid of the persecution, we're afraid of being weird? So this is the thing about the 11th house. We have the same principle manifesting socially as we have it internally. We have the treehouse and we say, oh, you're not invited to the treehouse. So what are our party affiliations, or that family member or that community member that we won't speak to because of who they're affiliated with, or the groups that they're a part of? What would it be like to just sort of be less defensive? Now, on the other hand, there might be a need to sort of be bold and courageous in not being afraid to just be yourself, to stand out. Mars is very active, and we're going to find ourselves making choices relative to what we perceive. And so for many of us, there would be the fear of, oh, if I say this or if I do this, I'll be different. So we kind of allow ourselves to get sucked into the momentum of the group mind, not wanting to differentiate ourselves. But what if we do stand alone? This might be the evolutionary push to be in resonance with our inner full community, to be a group of one, essentially. Maybe others aren't walking the path that you're walking, but you might start something because you're probably representing many, many other people who are also afraid and also suppress and don't want to stand out as well. Another interesting thing when it comes to community, it's a fascinating dynamic. We can find ourselves so identified with, this is my group. And then we start to feel alienated. Oh, this group, they're not meeting me, they're not getting me. And then this other group comes along like, oh, I didn't like you guys, but I think, you're much better. We can kind of go from one extreme to the other. And this often happens as a part of the movement towards integration, because we are so polarized towards one extreme. And then the other extreme ultimately serves as this counterpoint. I was this, but now I'm this. Until we stop attaching Pluto, grabbing at my social belonging, we'll find these extremes in some form or another. Ultimately, it's a part of this process of finding out who am I when I'm just me, and my belonging and my involvement happens as a result of me just being who I am. So let's talk about the other dimension, which is science, innovation, technology. There's always going to be, at any particular era, a social climate where we have the science and the innovations that are happening. And we're used to it. It just sort of, it's what happened. It's how we live. It's kind of what defines our humanity at any given point in time. But there's always this ongoing evolutionary impulse for new experience. We see something new. We have a new thought, a new idea. We kind of apprehend a more objective frame of reality. And that seeing allows us to, quote unquote, invent something new. But all inventions are, really, is apprehending the essential intelligence of creation and bringing it into material expression in a more refined way. You can think of like the Marshall McLuhan framework of, the computer was based on the content of the typewriter. You can say that the laptop and the iPhone are just the evolution of the computer and of the phone, right? We're just taking the existing archetypal expressions and updating them to a more refined level. But it's not the end all. Ultimately, it's all pointing to these universal archetypes, these qualities of communication, the internet being this grid of consciousness that's accessible everywhere, or the Akashic records. There's an intelligent design to reality that technology is always apprehending to some extent and giving it material expression. So from that point of view, to think out of the box and not just assume the existing scientific models, what we know about the universe, what we accept as true from a scientific point of view. Whenever we observe what was otherwise the previous assumed ground of our reality, it's no longer the ground. We're now seeing it, and we're standing on a new ground, a higher ground. And before, what we believed was ground is just seen as that last stage of consciousness. So there might be a surge of new vision, new insight, new ideas that come through with this particular transit that may have no context to anything that you've known or seen before, but will radically innovate and improve and evolve how you are living. Trust it, go with it. Society always evolves by a few people in any particular moment in time, kind of separating from the Capricorn consensus and having a new thought. It's always radical and wild, and people don't believe it, or you get persecuted or killed for thinking it. But that starts with a few, and then it ultimately spreads and becomes sort of the status quo Capricorn reality once again. And then Aquarius 11th house is there's always this ongoing edge of where the innovations are. And it's not always in the consensus scientific world. Sometimes it just comes from an accidental realization. It comes from thinking of something and seeing the world anew in a completely different way. And then suddenly there are new pathways and new choice points, new possibilities for humanity that otherwise was not seen because we weren't resonating at that level of consciousness prior. All right, and finally, Mars-Pluto in Aquarius in the 12th house. This is fundamentally about bringing and unifying our individual will with greater meaning and greater purpose. On the one hand, we can feel very activated and motivated. I'm going to help, I'm going to save, I'm going to bring people together, I'm going to create this utopian world, and then feel deeply martyred and exhausted and depleted when all of our efforts just ends up resulting in being taken advantage of. Bad people are doing bad things to good people, and no changes are really happening. And so there can be sort of this disillusionment that happened, and even like losing faith in humanity. I was trying so hard to give and give, and we can kind of become numb and just give up. Forget the humans, forget humanity, forget change. It's all going down anyway. And we kind of just lose our faith, right? But the other expression in that is we can really find ourselves accessing a higher purpose, not of our own making. The 12th house is all about how we surrender to the truth, and we don't try to control or distort reality according to what we're trying to make it be. We allow ourselves to become an instrument of meaning and purpose much greater than our own making. And this means we don't know who we are. We don't know ourselves. We didn't create ourselves. There's this quality of when we step outside of our own limited thinking, we become available for a path that wants to walk through us, right? That wants to use us for a higher meaning and higher purpose. So we can be fueled by this incredible amount of energy that just comes out of nowhere, where we know we are exactly where we need to be. So heightened synchronicity, a profound sense of activism and energy. And it really highlights a duality between one feeling very vulnerable and weak, like all of the manipulation and darkness of the world, and here I am so small, what can I do? How can I make a change? And all of the confusion that happens on that level. And the other is, there's all of the darkness in the world, and here I am tapped in, tuned in to a power much greater than anything I could ever have created on my own. And it's telling me who I am. It's guiding me. It's directing my life. And so we access that inspiration, and this could be, music. It can be some form of spiritual activism, something you're here to do, some action or some movement in life that you're here to generate. And the key is the generation of this positive energy momentum becomes its own defense and protection. The vulnerability of the signature can feel like our immune system, spiritual, psychological, and physical, is prone to attack. I'm just open and anything could happen. But when we're resonating with clear and purposeful action, that gives us strength and clarity and direction. Our health will get stronger when we're moving in positive and meaningful direction. So the other thing to consider with the signature, is for some souls, there might be a need to reconcile with the validity of the personal self, right? You might just want to be one of many, not stand out, not take on too much of a scene. And we have to understand the individual self plays a role and plays a function. But we have to overcome the fear of I don't want to take up too much space or distract the energy or make it about me. Oftentimes, single individuals or small groups of people will play a role that will trigger a social contagion that will actually manifest globally as well. So we just have to allow ourselves to be moved and inspired by that greater spiritual impulse and not get in the way with our own sense of unworthiness or unreadiness or I'm not strong enough and all that kind of stuff. All right, this completes my analysis of Pluto, Mars, and Aquarius for the 12 houses. Once again, my School Living Library is open for enrollment. The promotional window is available till the end of this month to receive the entire Essentials course transcript all at once for free with your initial enrollment. Check the description below to learn more about that, as well as my sessions and the newsletters that I often write along with these teachings. I'm sending one out in the next day or two. As always, thank you so much for watching.